No, I believe I'll start off my introduction now. Hello, every single person that's jumping into the call right now. It's great to see you guys again, and if this is your first time, welcome. I'd love to explain a little bit of the rules of what's going to go on for this session. Many of you guys know it all already, but I'm just going to do a quick rundown for anyone who's jumping in right now and hasn't had the experience or the knowledge in knowing what happens for this particular session. So you'll notice right away that we have a Q&A box and a chat box. Use the chat box to kind of interact with our speaker whenever they're asking a question. Make sure you're paying attention, just like those regular class times, but just from the comfort of a couch and with your favorite snack. And then you have the Q&A box. The Q&A box will be able for us to answer any questions that you have about the competition, and also to leave questions for Nikki to answer towards the end or in the middle of her presentation, whenever she'd like. Since you guys are showing up to this event, I always love to tell people, take advantage of it. Ask the questions about your project or the things that you want to know about, particularly from where you feel like Nikki's expertise is. The entrepreneurship mindset, which nearly covers the most major aspects of this competition. A majority and bulk of your points are going to be going towards this, so please give her your full attention, and I hope you guys enjoy, and I'm going to pass it over to Nikki. Take care.
All right, thank you so much for that great intro. Today's been really interesting. We're going to kind of step back from nuts and bolts approach to business and really talk about how we as entrepreneurs are going to be functioning different than normal people. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get rolling. Okay, first question, can everybody see this? Look good? Okay, looks like we're getting some responses. This is a great time to practice that. So you've got the chat, that's one way you can get to me. And then as Dylan mentioned, also through the Q&A, I will be trying to keep an eye on Q&A throughout the presentation because we're going to be introducing a framework for thinking. So it'll be a bit complex and I expect you guys to need clarification on a few things. So feel free to jump in and send a question my way. Moderators, if you guys see something pop up and I miss it, please let me know. And, go ahead and flag or jump in. I want to keep this as formal as we can. I know that's hard to do with so many people, but we'll get through it. Okay, so the name of this workshop is the Entrepreneurial Mindset and Systems Thinking for Business. So systems thinking is really a way to break the world down into understandable relationships. Okay. When you're an entrepreneur, I will largely argue that your number one challenge is not your product, it's not sales, it's not your startup capital, it's not your team. It's none of those one small components. It's actually you and what you are able to survive and what makes you thrive. So with all entrepreneurs that I work with, we focus in on sustainability, okay? You may not be the richest person in the world, you may not be that one making millions, but is your business model sustainable? Are you sustainable doing that business? As in, can you maintain good sleep patterns, relationships with family members, your coworkers, or are you going to burn yourself out? And one of those key characteristics that you have to really embrace is becoming resilient. Resiliency is something that is referred to lightly, but very few people take it seriously, especially how do you actually build resiliency. So we're going to start with the quick 8 steps just to keep in the back of your mind before we jump into systems thinking. Okay, entrepreneurs need to be able to accept change. You may have the best idea in the world. The next day, COVID happens and your idea is no longer relevant, okay? You can't fight that. You have to be able to pivot, as some say, find the next opportunity, realize that you have to let go of what you were working on, okay? So accept change, not only in yourself, but in the world around you, okay? Be a continuous learner. You guys are doing a great job by just being here, the first steps, right? When you leave school, you will still need to keep learning. You need to be hungry for it. Subscribe to really great academic journals, business journals, have your favorite bookmarks that you go to on a regular basis, talk to other entrepreneurs, talk to thought leaders, go to conferences, always be looking for the next thing that you don't know, and then do your best to become an expert on it. Okay. Take charge. You're gonna have to own it. You gotta own every mistake, every success. I'm gonna emphasize that. You have to own your successes as well as your mistakes, okay? No one is going to get you from point A to point B except for yourself. Every grade you receive, every entrepreneurship opportunity you take, every trip you go on where you might learn something, every book you read, you're the only one that controls that. So take charge. Find your sense of purpose. How do I go about this one? I've changed careers over 7 times, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I'm not old. Okay. I'm in a completely different space than I thought I would be at 19, a very different place than I thought I'd be when I was 24. So going from being a speechwriter to a Marine in the United States Marine Corps, which is a long story, to working in nonprofits, fundraising, organizational sustainability, to owning my own businesses, and I've owned several. It's taken me this extremely long journey and accepting change to know what I'm passionate about now. Okay, so don't hold yourself to a dream that died. Accept that change and find your new purpose. Okay, skill shifting. Oh wait, let's go back around to 5. Okay, so pay attention to your self-identity. We're always growing and changing. Our identities are not stagnant. That's part of the cool thing about learning, is that you get to become a better person, right? We can also do this through cultivating relationships, talk to people, ask them to be your mentor. People within not only your industry, but other industries are extremely, extremely giving of their time. First of all, it's such a boost to your ego when someone wants you to mentor them, but it's more than a friendship. They're going to help you learn to navigate some really, really tough waters. And they're always going to be there for that second set of ears as you move forward. So you don't feel alone. Okay? Being alone is a really scary thing, right? So cultivate relationships. Reflect back. Always question yourself. Always analyze what you've done. Take note. Could I have done better? What could I have done better? How did I behave in this situation? What would have been more effective? And this is not to dwell or beat yourself up, but this is to actually learn. It's the same as collecting data on issuing out a new product, right? You need to collect data on yourself. It's the only way you're gonna become more successful, okay? And then that skill shift. So you take into account all of these, right? And then be ready to learn that new skill that you need, become better at the skills you have, and shift so that way you're always supporting your move into your purpose, okay? That's how you improve your resiliency. Today, we're gonna look at a huge skill shift. We're gonna skip the first 7 steps here. We're gonna jump straight into a massive skill shift. So I guess buckle up. We'll see how this goes, right? Okay, systems thinking is an actual method of looking at problems and challenges and relationships, okay? We focus on very specific archetypes. So these are patterns that we see over and over again. They occur in the business environment. They occur in your personal environment as well. So relationship-based products and how they relate to each other. These are the problems that we see. These are the patterns that happen again and again and again, okay? So the term archetype comes from literature, right? So when an author goes in to write a story, they tend to reach back into very normal patterns or patterns that we all share, okay? So we've got things like the hero, right? Usually the regular guy or the regular gal that has to go through a trial and tribulation and gain new skills and wisdom in order to accomplish the task, right? So the hero, when you look at stories, they don't do this alone, okay? They actually have relationships with a lot of other archetypes. So you have the innocent or the young that's juxtaposed to the sage or the wizard. Unfortunately, in a lot of these archetypes, women that are old aren't seen as sage or wise. We're seen as witches, which are evil, but that's another topic altogether. But you also run into the caregiver, someone who helps the hero. So these are fairly universal throughout literature, and it's a way for us to understand a plot line, okay? It's the same thing with business, okay? We have these archetypes, so we have these patterns that we see, and everything is connected. Everything is a system within a system within a system, okay? So in the most basic sense, if you picture like an environment, so picture a lake, okay? You've got a lake, it's got fish in it, it's got frogs, the shoreline has birds, you've got animals that come to the water to drink it, you've got the weather affects the water, so temperatures, whether they're stable or rising or freezing during winter, all of this is like one giant system, right? You can't understand why the fish are behaving a certain way unless you understand all the other components in their environment. So that's a system that we learn about very early on, and it will help you understand these a lot more to think in that way. So we're looking at relationships and other components that predict behavioral outcome and financial outcome, political outcome, relationship outcome, and on and on and on. So there's 9 prominent ones that we're gonna look at. Fixes that fail or backfire, success to the successful, limits to growth and success, escalation, shifting the burden, drifting goals. This next one I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, tragedy of the commons. Again, this is something that's been used to talk about environmental crises as well as business. Number 8 is accidental adversaries, one of my favorites. I see this all the time. And then repression and revolution. So let's dive in. Okay, system archetype 1, fixes that fail or backfire. Okay, we're going to be using these diagrams to really understand how these systems work. So real quick, just an overview of what some of these symbols mean. You've got your problem symptom, and then you've got that arrow loops around with an S on it. The S stands for a solution that you come up with. That gives you your fix, okay? You implement or you take action, which is the fix, and the outcome is the problem, symptom is resolved. That's a balancing loop. Symptom, fix, symptom goes down, it's fixed, okay? But what happens a lot of times is that we'll jump into making a decision or putting into a fix too quickly without understanding why the symptom is there. So you'll see that next loop shoots off with that little hash mark. That's a time delay that then produces a new symptom, okay? And then this is a new consequence comes in and compounds or makes the problem worse. So an example of this would be, we're trying to get our business up and running. We've got the best idea in the world, and there's a team of 3 of us, right? But we also need to pay bills. So we go to the bank and we get a quick small business loan. We get $500 to make sure we can cover payroll for next month, and then our utilities, okay? Then we spend all month doing the same thing we did the month before. Payday comes, we don't have any money. So we go to the bank, we get another loan, okay? That loan immediately fixes the symptom of no cash, which we need. But the unintended consequence of that is that we build debt, and debt impacts our ability to run the business, right? The symptom of no money, and this is why this is really important, is if we recognize that we're in a fix that's going to backfire, taking on more debt that we can't service. If we recognize that and look at where the symptom is really coming from, which is a lack of revenue, right? Then the real answer is to shift either the price of the product we're selling so that we're having revenue coming in, right? So increase costs, or decrease expenses. Okay, cut overhead. That's the real solution, and it prevents the unintended consequence of going into more debt. All right. Real quick to show you how this flips both between business and absolutely any aspect of your life. You have a headache, so you take an aspirin. The aspirin fixes the headache, okay? But you get a headache again 4 hours later, so you take another aspirin. Eventually, you have a stomach ache, an unintended consequence from taking too much aspirin that's hard on your stomach. The actual problem of the headache can be fixed several ways. You can take that aspirin, which is the quick fix, or you can drink a ton of water, because we know that something like 70% of headaches are tied to dehydration. You can look at food allergies, you can look at, I don't know, maybe you're visiting your mother-in-law, that kind of thing. You know, so it could be environmental, it could be nourishment. There's a lot bigger scope in your environment or in your system that you need to look at rather than the quick fix of just taking an aspirin. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so what we really want to do is make sure that we avoid setting up this system in our lives, right? So we need to identify what the symptom is, so what our problem actually is, and call it what it is. We need to really know what we're talking about. Then look at what the short-term fix would be. What are we tempted to do? What's the easiest way to get through this? Okay, if we go that route, and this is where systems thinking comes in, is predicting. If we go that route, where are we going to see unintended consequences? What does the time delay look like? What are we going to know tomorrow that we didn't know today? Can we make some predictions here so that we prevent that quick fix? Like maybe we take the aspirin, but then we drink a gallon of water, right? So that way we're preventing the unintended consequence after the time delay. The real key here is that this system puts you in a position where you're digging deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole, and suddenly your quick fix won't fix the problem. At some point, the bank is not going to give you a loan. At some point, your employee that you're asking to come in and work overtime is going to say no, right? At some point, your product isn't good enough to bring in the money, the revenue. And if you don't change course, you're going to fail, right? Okay, Archetype 2, success to the successful. Again, this is something that we see all the time. Even when trying to get funding for your businesses, you may see this quite a bit. It's that whole, you need experience, but how do you get experience if no one will hire you, right? People will only hire those candidates that have, 5 to 10 years of experience in the job already. So group A, those with the experience, or in this case, if you're talking about getting financing for your business, the credit scores, the startup capital, you actually have to have money to make money, okay? You can't just get a loan if your bank account's empty. So group A has those resources and has access to already being successful, and they continue to grow while group B falls further and further and further behind. Okay, so we end up with that haves and have-nots. It looks like I've got a question here. Yeah, so this is something like snowballing, right? You've got one little problem. So I assume we're talking about Archetype 1. Sorry for the late jump in on that. But yeah, Archetype 1 is very much snowballing, okay? Okay. Let's see, Q&As. We've got a couple of questions here too. Okay, so resiliency with teams. Anonymous attendee, you brought that up. Could you please type that again at the very end of the presentation and remind me? That's a really great one, and we're gonna get into that. Okay, and then also how to find a mentor. Yeah, well, I'm gonna answer both those at the end because those are really great questions. Okay. All right. So success is successful. Again, if you need $1 million loan to get your business up and running, but you have no credit, you have no history of running a business, you don't have $500,000 in your bank account, which is half the loan that you're looking for, your chances of you getting it are very slim. So you have to start building your success yourself, okay? So that means understanding that your personal finances are just as important as your business finances. You need to keep your credit clean. And if you have questions about that, there's a lot of resources available on campuses to help you understand how to build credit. Okay. You need to take on loans, even small business loans, as soon as you can. Even if you don't think you actually need them, it's a way to build your business credit. And the Small Business Association is really great about helping you work with that. Again, back to mentors or other investors, this is a great way to build your capital and your credit scores this way, and show a track record of success. Every little success is going to build into the next success, okay? You have to show a track record, and that's why successful can be your best friend or it can be your worst nightmare, okay? Okay, a really great way to think about this is Monopoly. The way to win this game is to take everyone else's money, right? That's how you actually determine the winner of the game. Everyone else runs out of money. They have no property, they have no way to pay rent, they're destitute, and that's considered a victory, okay? This is very much the same pattern that happens in our daily lives. Think about when you go into your classes this fall quarter or the semester, your very first homework assignment. You're nervous, you don't know what the teacher's expectations are, it's a new topic, there's always a lot riding on our GPAs. You get 100% straight A on the assignment. How does your next assignment go? It's gonna feel easier, isn't it? You're gonna have more confidence. You may still study just as hard, but it's gonna feel easier. And then the next assignment you're gonna do fine on, and that grows, right? Your success grows. Suddenly the teacher knows you, they know your record. The last day of class, you have to take your final exam. Something happens, like your car breaks down, can't get to campus, internet goes out, you can't take that final exam. You send that email to the teacher and say, this is so unacceptable of me, but here's what's happened. I couldn't take the exam. Can I please reschedule? If you've shown success throughout the entire quarter and shown that you're reliable and that you're working hard, you have a much stronger likelihood that your teacher's going to let you retake that test than if you spent all quarter getting failing grades or not turning in homework at all, right? So the flip side of that coin is you're going to do your first assignment and you don't put in the work, or you don't understand the material and you don't ask for help and you get a failing grade, the next assignment's harder. The next assignment's harder. In fact, you probably quit doing your homework and it gets harder and harder and harder. You get to finals week and you realize you're not going to pass this class. So you contact your instructor and say, hey, I had a rough quarter. What can I do? Well, at that point, you've shown a track record of failure, right? Successful students are going to get help being successful. We're humans. It's just the way it works. Students who are struggling, for the most part, I work very hard with students that are struggling early on. But if you wait till that last minute, honestly, there's not a lot I can do to help you. There's not a lot your instructor can actually do to help you at that point because there's no time. You've run out of a resource that's very hard to replace. Okay. All right, so moving on to Archetype 3, limits to growth and success. It's so exciting starting a new business. Your first sale is just, it's always incredible. Like I said, I've run several different businesses. I'm what we call a serial entrepreneur. And anytime I close a client or sell a product or anything like that, it's exhilarating. It's so much the reason why we do this, right? Think of all the effort that goes into that first sale too. Okay. And then suddenly you start making a bunch of sales. You know, it seems like you can't produce your products fast enough. That growth phase. So you're like ticking along, trying to get your clients, trying to get customers, and all of a sudden, boom, you shoot up and you can't keep up with demand. This has happened to a lot of major businesses that I'm sure you'll do case studies on in your college career. Tesla's experienced this where they didn't make enough of their Model 3s. Customers were very upset. They couldn't get their cars on time, right? They had to wait. Anytime your customers are waiting, it's a bad day, okay? It impacts that ability to continue growing. So you put out all this effort to keep it going, but then you realize one day you're still working just as hard and putting out just as much effort. You're not gaining any more customers. Okay, you're not gaining any more sales. You've hit that market saturation point. And this is what Archetype 3 is. You keep putting out the same amount of effort, but you're not seeing the same results. So this isn't necessarily a negative archetype, okay? This is actually part of our business growth and our business life cycle. If we know it's coming, if we're honest with ourselves that we're gonna hit market saturation at some point, may not be 100% done, but it's gonna really, really slow down. Then we can plan for what to do next. iPhones is one of the best examples of this. They, first of all, reinvented what their market was and what saturation looked like. And then they knew that their product would hit maturity, that they'd hit that market saturation, and that there would be a limit to their growth, okay? So yeah, they continually be successful, but not as much as their investors have gotten used to, they've gotten used to. So what did they do? They got into a cycle of inventing or reinventing their iPhone just about every year, right? So they're constantly recreating that growth year after year after year. And it's been a really smart and really successful approach for them. Okay, so limits to growth and success, okay? Not necessarily negative, but what you have to do is be able to identify what the constraint in the system is. Is it the number of people you can sell to? Is it that your product is not consumable, as in you only need one, okay? So if you sell cars, that's part of the reason why cars are so expensive, right? Because not every person needs 9 cars. But t-shirts, which we wear just about every day, cost a couple dollars. So the quantity necessary for our market is different depending on the industry you're in. And that's also going to affect our pricing, right? And demand. So is the demand your constraint? Is your ability to produce your product your constraint? It takes a lot of people and a lot of materials to build a car, right? But again, you can make t-shirts. I know a lot of people that do. You just have to be able to come up with a really cool design and print it. So the second you've got your printer, they can put that on the t-shirt, you're off and running. So your constraint in that case is not the materials, it's actually your time. How many t-shirts can you actually make in one day? Okay. The other constraints, maybe something as simple as your knowledge base. You may get into a situation in your business where you don't know what to do next. And that's where your mentors can be really helpful. That's where further education can be helpful. That's where being that constant learner is so important. I grew up hating math. I'm one of those, sorry. And I always thought that because I didn't like it, I was bad at it. And then when I was in the Marine Corps, I got shifted over from being a linguist to electronics. And if anyone has studied electronics, it is all math. So like hardcore physical electronics, not computer, right? But like actual electronics. And suddenly like I had to know math inside and out. Turns out I'm pretty good at it. I just don't get as excited about crunching those numbers or making those formulas work. But then I realized I do have a passion for a certain type of numbers, and that's seeing my bank account get bigger. Okay. Business math is amazing. It's so exciting for me. So that skill shifted. I actually started to learn a bunch of new math, like break-even analysis, looking at your cash flow statements. This is all stuff that, you know, people will give to accountants because they don't like to do it. But due to my passion and excitement about this, I actually identified the constraint in my system, which was I need to better understand this math. It saves me a ton of money being able to do all this myself. Okay, so I broke that archetype 3, limits to my growth and success, because now I can do all of my financials and I don't have to pay an accountant precious money to have them do it. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick pause there. Is that making sense? Okay, I got a great question from R and B. What do those mean in the diagrams? Good question. Okay, so R is a reinforcing loop. So the orange is labeling what type of loop you're looking at. So your efforts reinforce. Okay, let me rephrase. You put out your efforts and then you have your performance, so your outcome, okay? And the level of your performance then dictates how much effort you put out. Another good example that's not quite business related, you want to lose weight. So you go on a diet. Initially, cutting calories and exercising, you drop 10 pounds really fast. Effort equated to awesome performance. So you put out more effort. That's reinforcing, okay? But then your constraint kicks in. There's a delay, right? Time delay. Your restraint kicks in. And suddenly you're not losing 2 pounds a week or 4 pounds a week if you're my husband and loses weight like nobody's business. So unfair. The constraint is actually your body's ability to continuously lose weight at that pace. Humans are not meant to weigh 0 pounds, right? So as you get closer to a healthy goal for your body, weight loss will slow down. No matter how much effort you put out, how many calories you cut, how much exercise you do, right? There's only so much weight you can lose. So that loop, when the constraint of the system is introduced, we call this a balancing loop. So it balances the efforts, it balances the performance out of that growth and success cycle. Okay, that was a good question. I hope that clarifies it. All right, so know what your constraints are and then rebuild your system, taking that into consideration. All right. I want to take this opportunity to probably touch on a few things that you guys have already been talking about, especially with the competition coming up. The lean business model, the lean startup model, is all about understanding systems thinking. Okay, so when you do a traditional business plan or the way we used to do business, pre-90s, 1990s, that is for some of you younger folk, we would design a business that was supposed to last over 100 years. Massive business plan, 30 to 100 pages long, all this stuff. And I'm not knocking the amount of research that went into this, but businesses would get locked into a plan, and 5 years down the road, they had no ability to change what they were doing. Okay, they were very rigid, right? Now with lean startups and this business modeling that you guys are learning to do, this is amazing. It's all based on little tweaks, little changes, moving forward incrementally and carefully, and not getting locked in to one thing. And when you think about system 3 with that, you know, you've got your constraint on growth and success, the best way to prevent that from happening, and actually the best way, honestly, to prevent any of these systems from becoming negative or challenges to you, is to adapt that lean startup mindset of you have your idea, you build it. You look at your product, you measure your metrics, right? How many sales? Are people willing to buy it? Does it work? What's the feedback? So you gather your data, you learn from it, then you rebuild, okay? Build, measure, learn. Build, measure, learn. You also hear people call these SMART goals. You're looking at benchmarks and constantly reevaluating. This prevents you from getting so far down the road that you're locked into one of these systems and you can't get out. Okay, so remember, build, measure, learn. No matter what system you find yourself in, what business you're in, what your relationships are like, this is something that can really help you stay agile and resilient. This is where resiliency comes from. Build, measure, learn. There are no failures. You build, you measure, you learn, you tweak. Okay? Okay, archetype 4 is called escalation. And this has two balancing loops. Okay, so you've got two people or two situations or relationships that are trying to constantly balance each other out like a teeter-totter, right? So A's activity, so the actions taken by either person A or the efforts of your business model has a result, okay? And those results are relative to efforts from person B, okay? So whatever A does is actually viewed as a threat to B. So B then responds and there's results, and those results are a threat to the success of A. This is business competition, okay? We're constantly competing with other people to have the best idea, to have the best product, to make sure that we come out faster than they do, right? It's always that rush to market, rush to getting to your customers first, okay? I will tell you that the research shows the vast majority of this is based on emotions. It's not actually based on data. And again, I'm going to use Apple as an example. There was a point in personal computers where there was looking like it was plateauing, like getting ready to hit market saturation, right? So how do you break that? Instead of them coming out with the exact same product and then just putting on the market to compete, Apple invented an entire identity, okay? Apple products appeal to a very specific type of person. They looked at creating, I would largely argue, a tribe of people that wanted to be Apple owners. They're willing to pay more for it. But you see that logo, you see the silver computers, you know that that person has certain characteristics, and that becomes part of their identity, and it's demonstrated through opening up that computer, okay? So Apple actually intervened into this escalation by shifting out of the system completely and treating product development like they didn't have competitors. Their only competitors were really themselves, okay? They broke out of that emotional stronghold and realized, yeah, Microsoft's gonna do what they're gonna do. We're gonna go do this and see what happens. Okay, any questions at this point? Make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, okay, this is great. So we've got 2 plants winding up around each other, fighting for light, right? Another way to think of this, yeah, so like if you're growing tomato plants, if anyone's tried this, light is incredibly important for them, right? They can't produce fruit without it. So they will actually shoot up inches in a day to get ahead of that other tomato plant. And then the other tomato plant will shoot up, okay? But sometimes, and plants can be smart enough to figure this out, will shoot sideways instead of straight up, which allows access to that sunlight, and then they can grow on their own. This is where the entrepreneurial mindset of creativity and not thinking like everyone else and willing to be different is so important. Okay, I feel like there was another one. Oop, I'm so sorry. Okay. Okay, so escalation, Jay, great question. Escalation isn't necessarily a bad thing, okay? It can encourage you to be more inventive, right? It can spark ingenuity. It can drive you to be better than you were yesterday. Yeah, escalation is definitely not always a negative system to be stuck in. You do just need to watch out for when it does become negative. So I would largely say that competition in business, awesome. Escalation can really drive you to the next level. Escalation between your team members can be extremely negative. Okay. It breaks down cooperation. It breaks down that united front to move forward. It will also impact things like resources. So the mentality of, I'm going to get mine. I don't care if you get yours, or I need to get mine before you get yours so there's enough for me. That can become negative. And that actually turns into a different system, which is system 7, tragedy of the commons, that we're going to talk about. So I will point out like the most basic concept of escalation that can be negative in relationships. If you think about kids trying to get your attention, okay? Or if you are a kid still, rad, I'm there too. Trying to get your parents' attention or someone that you want their attention, and your sibling or your friend trying to get the attention as well. And it just gets crazier and crazier, you know, so whether acting out negatively or positively, whichever, escalation can really ruin relationships. Okay. So just be aware that, especially if you're the leader of a small team, again, this is very emotionally driven. People are feeling threatened with their position and their access to resources, and they're upping their action to try to make sure that they're going to get the resources and attention that they need. And so again, it can be great if it drives healthy competition, but it can become very negative when they start sabotaging each other, right? Okay. Okay, and this actually ties perfectly into this slide. So as a leader, and if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be a leader. There's no halfway on this. That doesn't mean you have to be a dictator, okay? There are so many different forms of leadership. So when you're in a system where escalation is likely to happen, or you know that you're definitely in that system, there's a few different approaches you can take to leadership. You can encourage or discourage your competition based on how you interact with your team. So are you looking for more cooperation? So is there accommodation? Is there compromise, which is ideal? Low-level cooperation can be extremely negative. So even though it doesn't create conflict necessarily, avoidance is just as damaging. Okay, so you want to watch out for that too. On the other end of it, high-level cooperation with high level of competition, you end up in that really amazing spot of collaboration at its peak performance. This is when you're doing that group project, or you guys are working on your presentations for this competition, and everything gels, right? You're pushing each other to be the best you can, and that's when those ideas come out. Sometimes time constraints can make the best ideas happen. Competitions itself, so when there's an outcome or an award or getting your business funded, the opportunity for that will really push that collaboration. But you have to listen to each other, right? You have to actually cooperate, or you're not going to get that high outcome. Okay, so remember, we always have control over this. Like, this is one of the few things actually that we have control over, is how we present ourselves and interact with others. So it's back to that self-identity, right? Okay, so when you're looking at systems 4 components, if you end up in a negative escalation, or if you want to harness it to create the best output, these are some areas that you can look into to encourage or to grow your skill set to be more effective. Emotional intelligence. You have to understand what you're feeling and what those feelings are telling you. Emotional intelligence is one of the least studied aspects of being human, and yet it's the most human thing there is. Okay. All of us experience emotions. Depending on our culture, cultural intelligence, right? Depending on our culture, we're taught to actually understand those emotions differently, and that the appropriate actions or behavior for those emotions can be different. So let me give you an example. In the United States, I'm going to use a very broad example, but in the United States, we socialize males and females differently. So our culture treats males and females a little bit differently. When we experience frustration at a very, very young age, it's more acceptable for males to show anger, right? So that energy, that puffed up, the clenched fists, the physical aspects of anger when they're frustrated, okay? Females, it's more acceptable for us to cry when we get frustrated. If we clench our fists and puff up and have the physical display of anger, we're socialized that it's more negative, okay? So it's more acceptable for us to cry. Okay, super broad, really major stereotype, just an example of kind of what we're thinking here. I will leave you with two things that's very important for an entrepreneur. There's not a single emotion that is bad, okay? We need them. They are insights. They help us navigate the world. Not only that, but if you don't understand what makes you angry, you don't know how to protect your self-identity. You cannot be resilient if you cannot let go of anger, if you cannot identify what causes it and then how to resolve it, okay? Fear is one of our best friends. Fear, at its most simple form, teaches us that something's changing in our environment. So if you're scared of launching your business, and this is the number one reason why people won't start their own businesses, they're afraid, they're experiencing fear. Starting your own business is a massive change in your environment. But that's it, okay? You will feel fear, but a bear's not going to jump out and bite your head off. So understanding that role and how it plays out in your life, make adjustments to prepare for it. And then it lessens the fear. And I'll tell people too, even if you're scared, jump. Being an entrepreneur is rad. Like, it's so good. So get over that fear. And that'll help with your emotional intelligence too. Cultural intelligence, experience as many different people as you can, learn from them, work with as many different cultures as you can. Service leadership, being a leader that serves others. This is an entire field of study. At the end of the PowerPoint, I've got an email you guys can ask if you want follow-ups on that. Service leadership is incredible. The learning mindset we've already talked about. And then I would largely argue, especially in startups and lean business model, you need to understand that even if you are the leader of the group, you are no better than anyone else on your team. You're no worse than anyone else on your team. You need that equality in order to actually have the best combination of competition and compromise, right? That's how we get back to that amazing outcome that we're looking for, where everybody's firing on all cylinders, everybody's putting out every idea, and you get that one that you've never heard of before. They have to trust you, and you have to trust them. Okay. Archetype 5, shifting the burden. This one's a really interesting one. And again, it can kind of, start to meld into another system if you don't catch it soon enough. But really what we're looking at with shifting the burden is you look at that short-term solution, that quick solution to fix a problem. And it actually undermines your ability to find a long-term fundamental solution. Okay. So when I was working in the nonprofit world, this was just paramount. Like, we see this constantly. We need money as a nonprofit. So we go to a donor and say, hey, will you help us? I worked with an organization that helped kids out. So save the kids, right? And they would say, cool, I'll give you $1 million, but I want to control where the money goes. Okay. For those of you that are interested in making the world a better place, and I'm one of them, this is the burden of nonprofits, is how they get their money. Okay. You'll also see this in entrepreneurship though. You need a big infusion of funding and you go to like a venture capitalist or, mom and dad. A lot of people get their first loans from their family, but be careful who you take money from, because in the immediate solution, it may help, right? Suddenly you got cash, but the reinforcing loop of that side effect prevents you from actually coming up with the full solution for what's going on. Okay. So by taking money from a donor that wants to change our programming because they don't like it, we actually have what we call mission drift. So every nonprofit puts together a mission, how they're going to fix the problem in the world that they see. By bending to the needs of the donor because we want the money, we then fail to actually implement the mission the way we know how, or the way we know needs to be done. When you're getting your business up and started, this is the same problem. You know what you need to do. You know what your vision is. You got to trust your gut on this. Get back to that emotional intelligence. What is your gut telling you? You may have to turn money down at some point because there may be a condition that lender wants that is going to prevent you from creating the product or the service or the outcome that you really know is your calling. Okay. So slow down. Shifting the burden is a system archetype of rush decision-making. Urgency is applied to the situation. You make a quick decision without looking at those long-term effects. So slow everybody down. You're the leader. Slow yourself down, slow your team down, and look for sustainability. It may mean smaller growth, slower, but it's sustainable. You maintain control of your product. You maintain control of your team. You maintain control of your vision. Okay. So I love this picture. It cracks me up every time I see it. Back to resiliency. Like, you guys are going to fail. I'm just gonna put that out there. I've failed. I fail all the time. And that's good. Like, that's how you get stronger. I don't know how else to put it. In fact, I actually encourage you guys to go out and fail. Like, next week, do something that you've never done before, and there's a high likelihood that you're not going to do it well. Just go do something. Go take like an art class if you can't draw. Jump into a math class that you don't want to take. Do something that's going to really scare you and that you most likely will not be successful at. The more you do that and the more you get used to that feeling, it's not that it dulls out, it's that it's less scary, okay? Failure suddenly just becomes a thing that you go through and then you move on. You take what lessons you learn from it and you put it towards the next one. So when you're looking at sacrificing your long-term goals for a short-term outcome, try to reduce the urgency of now. So if is it really something you have to decide right now? So prepare yourself for tolerance for change. Be ready to change. Be ready to take risk, okay? Sometimes letting money go is the biggest risk. Sometimes taking on an investor is a huge risk. But know what you have tolerance for and what your team has tolerance for, okay? Look at what your skill deficits are in the team and how you can improve that. Does it mean learning something new yourself? Does it mean contracting out to an expert or a mentor, consultant for a short term? Is that a good investment? Be ready to really acknowledge where you have flaws and where you need help. The number one thing I can say about the system is be proactive versus reactive. Look ahead. When you're planning things out with your team, get that Debbie Downer, I love Debbie Downer, Get the Debbie Downer, get the person who's just so negative that they see everything that goes wrong all the time. And then ask them, okay, here's what we're going to plan to do. Blow it up. What's going to go wrong? It's so much easier to build in fire prevention than it is to put out a fire. Okay. So you need those people that are pessimists to help you get through this. Because honestly, a pessimist frog wouldn't be in the swamp anywhere near the stork. It's too dangerous. Okay. Yeah, he's not giving up, which is great, but is there an element of caution that you can build in that'll prevent you from getting to the situation? And I'm going to check questions real quick. Okay, so I have someone recommended Dan Price at Gravity Payments. Super interesting case study. Really recommend it to everyone. Good call. That's a really good help there. Appreciate that. And let me check the Q&A section. Okay, so this question is referring to the anger point of system 4. How does impatience compare to anger in terms of how significant it is and to fix it? That's a really great question. Okay, so anger is an emotion. Impatience is a state of being, and I know that sounds really fluffy. My consulting business, my successful heart song, this is what I was meant to do business, is to train companies on emotional and cultural intelligence for entrepreneurial sustainability. So I work specifically with entrepreneurs on their emotional intelligence to survive the world, okay? So impatience is super complex because you have to look at what's informing it. You could become impatient because you're tired, you're hungry, you want to go home. You can also become impatient because you've got someone on your team that you don't work well with. So you just don't even listen to their ideas anymore because you know you're not going to like it, right? So anger is very different. Anger is an emotion that arises when somebody is directly infringing upon our sense of self. So if somebody calls me stupid, I'm not going to get impatient. I'm going to get angry because I view myself, I believe myself to be an intelligent person. Okay. But it's getting late in the day, and I'm sure you guys are getting ready for dinner. So you guys might be getting impatient with how long this is taking. And when you become impatient, what you have to do is actually evaluate outcomes to efforts, right? So some of you may decide that you've been on here long enough and you'll just catch the video later. Others may decide it's worth staying live and being a little bit hungry and eating later, okay? Okay, how can I increase my emotional intelligence? Also off topic, but is it bad to be friends with coworkers or team members or even subordinates? Whew. Okay, emotional intelligence. Language of emotions. Carla, oh no, I just forgot her name. I will send that out. Language of emotions, the best on emotional intelligence. There's also The Emotional Life of Your Brain, really great read. It's all neuroscience. Not bad to be friends with your coworkers and team members. And it's also not bad to be friends with your subordinates, as long as you understand, I guess, the line. And this is something that we all learn as we grow. You know, the more experience we get, we start to understand, okay, maybe I only have one beer when I'm out, right? And that gets into an HR conversation real fast. I'm incredibly close with a lot of my coworkers, and I consider them friends, but that's built over a long period of time. And it's also because we've established certain ground rules early on. I would take HR classes. I would read literature on human resources, just to really explore best leadership practices. Harvard Business Review always has amazing articles on this. So I would definitely see if your school has a membership to that, and just read and read and read and then practice. And again, you're going to make mistakes, but hang in there. Okay, I know that we are running over, so I'm gonna scoot a little bit. Okay, Archetype 6, drifting goals. It's just really caving into pressure to lower your standards because everybody else is impatient and they don't want to wait until the actions you've taken actually go into effect. I could use a business example. I'm actually going to use a political example. Drifting goals is the number one thing wrong with our political system. No matter what legislation gets put into place, and this is categoric across the globe, not just in the United States, politicians put a law into practice, everybody's unhappy, but rather than waiting to see how the law actually takes effect and what outcomes it creates, which takes years, you know, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 10 years, sometimes 20 years, they will come in and change it immediately. Okay, so we don't actually know it works anymore, right? So in your business, this is the same thing. If you have a goal of selling a certain number of units, or you have a goal of launching your business even in the next, like you set 6 months to launch, a couple things go wrong, but you know you're on track, okay? Your team may not. So they're gonna pressure you to like, well, maybe we don't need to sell that many units. Maybe we can just lower it. Again, drifting goals, not always a negative thing, but it's a compromise. It's a huge compromise. And it shifts your end product and your end outcomes significantly, okay? So again, if you're in this situation where you're under pressure to lower or shift your goal, can you slow people down? Is there a way to reassure them? Is there something that you can do that will kind of take the burden off, right? So that you can give it time to fully flesh out. This may be as simple as having another job while you're trying to get your business off and running. Call this a bridge career, okay? You'll notice that you've got business people and business owners, entrepreneurs that are also teachers. We love both, but teaching definitely supports our ability to run our own businesses because it provides enough of an income so that when we're getting in that startup phase or we hit a rough patch, it bridges that gap for us so that we don't have to give up on our businesses, okay? And we love sharing our wisdom with you guys, obviously, but sometimes it's better to say, hey, this isn't going as quick as we want, but we're on the right track. What do we need to do to give ourselves enough time for it to actually happen? Okay. Okay, tragedy of the commons. This is something that if you know anything about environmental science, absolutely 100% tied directly to business. Basically, you have a finite resource, like a plot of land, and everybody's dependent on it for their success and their outcomes. So what ends up happening with human greed, especially if there's no regulation, we'll use sheep for an example. I'm sorry, I skipped too far forward. You end up buying more sheep than the other person, and your sheep eat more grass than the other person. You're still more successful, but their sheep starves to death and they lose their business, okay? Tragedy of the commons, finite resource, people competing over it for the immediate, this is the most important part, immediate gratification, immediate outcome, immediate gain, without taking into consideration all activity and the pressure it puts on that one resource, which has a combined drain on the system, okay? Time delays are very important. If you want to start a business to make the world a better place, solve tragedy of the commons. There's a great company who gives a crap. They make toilet paper delivered straight to your house. The toilet paper crisis hit in the United States. It wasn't an issue for us because it delivers, okay? They are officially carbon neutral. They found a way to make a product that destroys so many pounds of trees every year to be neutral. So they use bamboo, grows fast, grows clean, doesn't affect trees, okay? It's also really good for sucking in carbon and putting out oxygen. So they looked at this tragedy of the commons, us using trees for toilet paper, and they found a solution by, instead of using trees as the resource, they started using a different resource. It's much more sustainable. That's the kind of business where you guys are going to make the biggest difference. Okay. Systemate accidental adversaries. This is going to happen a lot with people on your team. This is really a relationship issue, but basically you've got, a person taking action to improve their success at the expense of the other person. Okay. So, marketing versus IT. If you've got a marketing team and then you've got the tech support team, okay. They both want to collect their paycheck. They both want to be necessary. But if they ever feel, okay, back to emotions, right? If they ever feel threatened that there may be personnel cuts coming up, they're going to do anything they can to show that they are absolutely necessary. One way that like tech support can do this, and I don't recommend it, is that they'll come in and fix whatever's wrong with your computer without actually teaching you how to fix it yourself the next time. So you're always dependent on them. Okay. That slows you down from doing your work. Next time your program doesn't pop up right, or you can't get your email, you have to call them and wait for them. Yes, you need them, but you suffer. Your actions are slowed and your performance is slowed because of it. Okay. We're on the same team, we're all working for the same company, but now we're suddenly adversaries. They're making me look bad. I'm going to trash talk them, and it gets bad. Okay, so this is unintended, very disruptive feedback. The dynamic creates a pattern, and let's say it's a figure 8. So my actions create this outcome, which is bad for you. So then you take action, which puts me into a bad place. And this can be done in things that seem really harmless, but in the long run, it's going to slow down the efficiency of your team and your ability to do business. Okay. So I love this cartoon. Yeah, you can do anything you want. You can work any way you want, as long as you're still working the 90 hours a week. So we all know that the normal work week is 40 hours. In some places it's less than that. But there is a tendency now for, especially in America, for people to be way overworked. Don't do that to your employees. Like, you'll burn them out. But I like the tension in this cartoon about, like, yes, HR says that they're being flexible, but they're not. Okay. Here's another way to think about it. Run this by legal, but run really fast so they don't actually see it. Okay. Straight up business ethics, right? Yeah, technically they ran it past legal, but they didn't want to get caught with what they're doing. So that's two parts of the same business being in contention with each other, in conflict. Okay, last one. Thanks for hanging in there, guys. So Archetype 9, repression and revolution. This is on a small scale, but it's also what we see politically, socially, culturally. You've got the person making decisions or the group making decisions, and those have repressive outcomes on another group. Okay. The members of the oppressed group join to act defiantly. So it gets bad enough to where we start talking to each other and say, hey, this isn't okay. We're going to do something about it. At that juncture, you can prevent further repression and revolution by listening and working and finding a solution. That is the best way to break the system, right? Listen, learn, do better, change. Okay. So if you don't do that, if you actually implement more policies, you're going to make people more upset, and then they're going to fight harder. And this is a form of escalation. Okay. At its heart, it's about power and control, obviously. On the small scale, we end up with things as simple as people coming in late because you made them stay late the day before, right? And then if you punish them for that, they're going to disconnect a little bit from you. They're going to feel upset about it. And they're going to push that policy. And then, it's really, again, it's back to treating people with dignity and equality on your team. You have to recognize that, again, you're no better than them and they're no better than you. We just all have slightly different roles. So be aware of how your policies actually impact people. Okay. So again, we see this obviously on a much larger scale in culture and politics. What's interesting about this system is that if you see this happening somewhere, like if you see the repression happening somewhere, and there's a technical or a tech solution, a consulting solution, if you see a solution to prevent the revolution that is destructive, then suddenly you're valuable. Okay. That's a business opportunity in and of itself. Right. Okay, cool. I always love this picture of Milton. If you've never seen Office Space, I highly recommend it. At the very end of the movie, Milton had had enough. They'd moved his desk and they hadn't been paying him, and he was repressed enough to where he revolted and he burned the entire building down. So remember that change is good, change is healthy. Every business that I run is a form of social change, and that's awesome. That's to prevent the violent revolution. Okay. Drastic change too fast is destructive in its nature. We want to look at short-term, long-term, unintended consequences, use our knowledge of all of these systems and systems thinking in order to prevent the need for drastic change. Okay. That's what I got. Okay, so referring back to a couple of questions. Resiliency between yourself and within a team. First and foremost, you have the most control over yourself, right? We can emotionally supporting the members of our team is important. Listen to them. What do they need? Do they hit a point where they need a day off? Like, yeah, it's a Tuesday, but go get some ice cream and walk around or something. That check-in, showing that you understand, acknowledging that everyone's burning out, and being empathetic to it rather than, yeah, get over it, we're all there, will go a long way. But some of the resources I talked about, like, you know, emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence will go a very long way. Read as much as you can on those. And what will happen is if you give those skills to your team, they are going to innately become more resilient. Okay. They'll know when to check in with you. They're going to be honest with how they're feeling. They're going to be honest about what they need, and that's going to build it. Okay. If you hit a rocky point and something goes wrong, the way you react to it is going to affect their resiliency. Okay. When COVID hit, this is really interesting. When COVID hit, everybody freaked out about online education, but the vast majority of us had already been doing it, right? Like, I know that half or over half my classes I teach are online, but the tone and the reaction that you as the leader brings to the table will impact how those that you lead respond to it. So some teachers freaked out. Some were just like, oh, yeah, right? So the class felt nervous, felt anxious. As leaders, the teachers should have shown confidence and calm, right? We have a lot of control over that. So continue to educate your team, encourage them to educate themselves as well, okay? How do you go about asking someone to be your mentor? You ask them directly, absolutely. You find someone that you're interested in learning from, and you either send them an email explaining why and asking to set up regular coffees or tea or whatever, and to say, hey, I'm really, really interested in learning more about your experience in this. Can we meet once a month for a couple months? Okay. Other than that, like, make it formal. Don't try to hang out with them as a friend. Be very formal about it, and be clear on what you want to learn from them too. So when you go to have a cup of coffee with them, make sure you have questions about what you want to learn from them. Okay. So do you want to learn how they got funded? Do you want to learn about, like, how they survived their product getting rejected a million times? Okay. So be clear on what you want to learn. Also know that sometimes mentorship, it can change. Like, so you may outgrow someone after a while, but you can learn a lot from people, and just keep looking for those opportunities. Okay. All right. How do you handle when one of your subordinates is rude to you directly in front of everyone and challenges you, but you don't want to make a big deal of it or go to HR? Woo. Okay. Man, there's so many dynamics here. Okay. So this is huge because you probably were angry, right? They just challenged your authority. There's a way to calmly call them out on it in front of everybody, because you need to maintain your leadership, right? Just staying calm and simply saying, that was inappropriately worded. I'm not sure if you intended it that way. What are you really asking, or what are you really saying? And again, that's going to come back to you keeping yourself calm and realizing sometimes you don't have all the information. Maybe it's coming across as rude because they are, maybe they come from a different culture than you, and the way that they're talking is not rude where they're coming from. Maybe they're exhausted or hungry, or, all the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If there's something else impacting them where it's not intended. And then if they're just straight up actually challenging your authority because, and there's no other reason for it, and they're trying to start a fight with you in front of your team, I would simply say, we're going to end this here. You and I can talk about this later. Let's move on. And then you address it one-on-one with them. At some point, you may need to go to HR, but make sure that you've done everything you can to resolve it. Okay. And that may be as simple as asking, what's going on? How can I help? Right? Be bigger than, be better than them. Eduardo, I've got a professor and a comma, but not a comment. Is there something I can help you with? Here's a good one. Okay, when does drifting goals become stubbornness? When it no longer serves you. Okay, so yeah, this is the difference between getting locked into something, right? We talked very early on at the beginning of the presentation about like the lean startup model. Build, evaluate, move on, and then reevaluate, collect data, collect information, always be changing. Okay. That is with your goal in mind, right? Getting bogged down in how you get there is the problem. Okay. So you need to try something. You need to put a plan of action into motion and to see if it gets you to your goal. What you're talking about with stubbornness, that's when, that's really when the signs, the metrics are showing that what you have implemented actually is not working. There's a huge difference between not being patient enough for it to work, not allowing it to work, and then staying the course, even though every sign, every metric, everything your team's doing says it's not going to, and you need to change directions. Okay. I hope that makes sense. Should you fire someone who indirectly doesn't do their job and only does their job when you bring it up? Yes, absolutely. Just make sure you do it properly through your HR channels. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you guys are all going to fail. This is their fail, right? Make sure you document and you do your proper training, and then let them go. Okay. But like I said, talk to your HR person about this. They have a whole process in place, I'm sure. So, okay. Okay. Let's see. In the chat, is there anything else going on?
That's about it.
Okay. Awesome.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Nikki. It was a pleasure having you, and thank you guys for staying some extra minutes to have your questions answered. I always think that these presentations always help, and one of those takeaways I've gone away is, that saying, 1 out of 10 businesses make it successful. Well, I believe there is some validity to that, even if the percentage is a little off. That's because the psychology and understanding of an entrepreneur really does bring that, business to success. I don't think anyone would argue about having the mind of Jeff Bezos or something like that. So, although you can't adapt his mindset, you can learn from these presentations to kind of see exactly what kind of process does go through the mind of someone so successful like that. And hopefully you guys can take away from that too.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Dylan. Just to wrap up, we don't need 2 Jeff Bezos in this world. We need Jeff Bezos, and then we need you coming up with the next best thing, right? So I appreciate your perspective on that.
Absolutely. Now, I know that some more questions have popped up. However, since we're running so low on time, I don't know,
please,
Nikki, how do you feel?
Please just email me these
Yeah.
questions, because then I can also send you guys direct resources, okay?
Sounds good. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to her. She's led a wonderful presentation and a very friendly person as well. So we hope that you guys take care tonight and get those get those forms done and get your submissions in. The deadline for those semester colleges is on October 1st, but if you're a quarter school, then you have on October 10th. A little bit more time, but the days are closing in fast, so get those answers ready. All right, you guys all take care. Thank you for joining us.